This is who I am, Dr. Rick Perea, PhD, Melanie, my wife. She has a master's degree in counseling. We work with athletes at all levels. Middle school, high school, college, professional. Work with a lot of NFL, not only players, but coaches. We work with them to help them understand how to reach their athletes through psychological protocols. Okay? We work with NBA teams, high school teams, so we have a very eclectic base that we reach. Volleyball is a real passion for us because Melanie played volleyball at the University of Alabama. And then played a little bit of indoor, pro, outdoor as well. So volleyball is a real passion for us. My daughter played volleyball here at this club for a short time and then moved on to soccer and played soccer at college in Arizona State. Okay? So we were both athletes, we both been coaches. We coached at the high school and college level, me football, her volleyball, and track. So we have a good eclectic background. Okay. Doesn't mean we know everything, but we think we have a pretty good handle on how to put your athlete in a position for success. Okay? So let's get started. Alright. One thing I want us to understand that there is what we call motivation science. And motivation science means that there's a science to motivation. You know, oftentimes parents and coaches try to motivate their athletes. And they use some real interesting techniques, some real interesting protocols. But in sports psychology and in performance psychology, we research how to motivate your athlete and put them in a great position. Unfortunately, some parents, I made these mistakes. Sometimes as parents, we think that by coaching and encouraging our kids and telling them, this is what happened to me and this is what I did, sometimes we think that's going to really inspire them. Telling them to work hard, make sure they give full effort. And it can, but at times it can actually impede their development and growth. So we've got to understand when they need us and when they need us to back off. I can tell you this, about 70% of the adolescent athletes that come into my office, and I can tell you this, adolescence is between 10 and a half to 24 and a half. The prefrontal cortex of the brain does not stop developing until 24 and a half. Okay? So 70% of the athletes that come into our office with perceived issues like lack of confidence, not having fun, not developing, about 70% of that we can look at, it's within the family system. It's not just the athlete. It's things that we may be doing in our own home that could be impeding our athlete's development. Now, there's not a parent out there that wakes up and says, how do I handicap my kid? Right? I don't think so, at least. So, but there are parents that unintentionally do that. So we're going to talk about that. Okay? Now, there's extrinsic motivation and intrinsic motivation. Okay? Intrinsic motivation is what we want our athletes to have. We want them to be motivated because they love the game. They do. It's okay that you do too, but we don't want that to live through you. We want them to be passionate, love it, love to come to practice, and love to play. And ironically, the way that develops intrinsic motivation is through their experiences. Okay? It's not because we prod them or we put them in situations and tell them what to do. Most athletes get involved because of their parents' input, that's fine. But we've got to remember that we're not their coach. They have coaches, right? And oftentimes, and I made this mistake too, I played, I coached, I thought I'd coach my daughter in certain sports, and I remember coaching her, I'll never forget, I was coaching her in track and field. She was a sprinter. And I thought I was just telling her what to do, how to come out of the blocks. And I looked up and she got a tear coming down her face. And I thought I was just coaching her. But what I didn't realize is my delivery system probably wasn't appropriate, being that she was my own daughter. So I've made some of these mistakes too. Okay? So external stimuli means they're motivated because somebody's like they're playing to please someone, a coach, a parent. Okay, they're playing because they want to win a championship or a trophy. And you might say, well, everyone wants to win a championship. Yes, but it's got to be through the process, and I'll explain that in a few minutes, okay? Intrinsic motivation is that you value the reward process, okay? In your home. I'll give you an example. So if you have an outside hitter and they come home and they have 12 kills, is it okay to say, great job, 12 kills? Is it? What do you think? Okay, sometimes. What do you think? In the same time, 12 kills, no problem. Here's the concern with that. That's rewarding outcome. Okay? There's going to be a match where she has 4 kills, 3 kills, but she plays really well. She does everything else well, right? So we want to reward the process. You can still give her some attention, give her some depth. What would we say? If we were rewarding process in that context, what would we say? Help me, people, come on. I don't know this very well, I gotta learn it myself. Help me! What could we say if she's an outside hitter and she had 12 kills, but I don't want to reward outcome? What can I say? Good effort. Love watching you play today. Great footwork. Great arm swing. It's all process. Because whether she has 4 or 12, it's the process that you're rewarding. And if you reward the process, they're going to develop intrinsic motivation because they love the sport. They love the process of how they get there. Does that make sense? And I know that's unusual for a lot of people to hear. Because in our society, we're so outcome-based. Right? If you're in real estate, you only get paid when you do what? Sell a house, right? So if you haven't had any sales in the month of February, and your sales manager comes to you and says, how come we haven't sold the house? You said, well, man, I'm focusing on the process, bud. I'm focusing on the process. What's he going to say? But ironically, if you do focus on the process of building relationships with people, guess what will happen with sales? It'll increase. So it's the same thing with an athlete. We want to value and reward process. But yet as coaches we'll often reward outcome. And it's really simple, but it's something we've really got to adhere to, is figure out how we can reward process. Great footwork. Our son plays football, he's 11 years old. And if he scores a touchdown or something, we never say, great job, score a touchdown. It's a way to hit the hole. Way to keep your shoulders, hips and shoulders square, the line of scrimmage. Just process. And he values that. Yes?
What about the universe when they have terrible?
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. Have you played sport before? Okay, opposite play, there's days when we have those days, right? Nobody's perfect, nobody's a machine. And there's going to be days where they're dragging their butt around. I get that. But again, we don't want to beat them up for that. We don't want to say, man, you look like crap today. What's going on? We have these parent protocol cards. I think that's that. And we'll get to that in a minute. But, like, for example, on the ride home after a tournament, okay? No questions, 2 compliments. So in this context, how can we compliment what we perceive to be lack of effort? What can we say as a parent on that ride home? What can we say? I mean, we don't want to lie to them, right? We don't want to falsely stroke them, but what can we say? That's a question. No questions. 2 compliments. What can we say? I love watching you play. I love watching your team play. Okay? What else? Come on, this is creative, people. What's the root word of creative? Your hair looks good. Your hair looks good today. Yeah. I love that. Your coach does a great job. You really have a great team. And I love watching you play. Those are honest. Right? Let me tell you something. When you have a player that doesn't give full effort, they feel that struggle. They feel that. Let them skin their knees. Let them feel the wrath of that. Let them sit at the end of the bench and feel that. Instead of saying, man, you know what? I'm paying a lot of money for club volleyball. you better stay going, right? And then we let them. And then they start feeling, oh my gosh, I got to play well to play on this team. I got to play well or else I'm going to get pulled off. That develops extrinsic motivation. I mean, people, when they learn to ride, remember when they learned to ride a bike from training wheels? How many of you sat them down and showed them a video to do that? What did you do? Put them on a bike. And what did they do sometimes? Fall off. Fall to the right, fall to the left. Finally got it, right? But they skin their own knees and they learn from that. You know, I hear parents say this all the time. I don't want my kids to make the same mistakes I did. Why not? You learn. People, the greatest way to learn, call it knowledge acquisition, is to experience it. So if she doesn't give full effort, she'll feel that wrath. It may not be that day. It'll be the next week of practice. And then she'll learn. She'll develop her own motivation. We get real scared as parents thinking, oh my gosh, if I don't intervene here, if I don't tell her to work hard, sit down with her and have a 45-minute conversation, she's not going to work hard because she's not doing it right now. She may not. And you know, the reality is sport's not for everybody. It's really not. Some people are really wired to go and some people are not. But the only way we're going to really find out if she has intrinsic motivation, or he does, is to let them feel the repercussions of that. You get what I'm saying? And you don't have to want it. Again, I love your coach. Your coach does a great job, and I love watching you play. Okay? And then when you start to develop that intrinsic motivation, they'll be inspired on their own. They'll be driven on their own. And that's key. And one of the things that we see, because we research this, that athletes become driven because they have ownership of it. Not because they're trying to do it for any external reason. You know, extrinsic and intrinsic are just fancy words for internal and external. And we've seen it many times. Athletes, if they're not intrinsically motivated, when they go away to college, it'll unwind itself. Because there's not that character, there's not that motive to perform. Okay? So there's a science to motivation. And here's the ironic thing. There's a lot of coaches that don't understand that. There's a lot of parents that don't understand that there's a science to motivation. I'm on 104.3 The Fan a couple times a month. I was on Friday. I think you guys are listening to me, right? I was talking about there's a way to get teams to perform at peak levels. There's a methodology. And yet some people don't follow that. One of them is with parents is to do what we're asking them to do today. Okay, achievement motivation is the third kind of motivation. Focus on individual improvement in the team context. So for volleyball players, how could you, athlete, focus on individual improvement? What could they do to help them? You can help me out here. What could they do to really motivate them? Okay? Because again, we don't want them to be extrinsically motivated. And it's not necessarily your job to tell them what to do, but give me an example. What can we do for individual improvement? Okay. Well, we don't really want to coach them at all or give them any instruction. But just create. What do you think? Help. What do you think we could do? How can we set up? Coaches, you can chime in here too. What can we do to help them individual improvement, to help them motivate them?
As coaches, we're always looking at technical improvements.
Okay. Okay. So if you say to your athlete, wow, looked like you had great arm swing today. Now you may not know crap about volleyball, right? If I say you look like you had great arm swing, I don't even know what that really looks like. Because when I do this, my wife laughs at me. I don't know what I'm doing right or what I'm doing wrong. But okay. But achievement motivation is just them trying to get better in specific skills. And that's process-oriented. That's not outcome. Okay? So that's another way that you can learn to develop intrinsic motivation from your athlete. Okay? We'll come back to that. There's rewards and punishments. Okay? How many of you have an athlete that has ever struggled academically? Let's just be honest. Okay? So here's an idea. Change environments to help that athlete. What could we do by changing the environment for academics? What could we do? Okay. That's changing the environment. What else? What else? Take the phone away. Right? Yeah, it's all in preparation, people. Take the phone away. What else? What else can we do? Okay. Structure it so they're in an environment that's conducive to being able to focus. But you have got to think about changing an environment that's going to help them be successful, whether it's at home or in sport or at some place. But changing an environment is really good for helping with the rewards and punishments. There's two things we look at in psychology. It's called classical conditioning and operant conditioning. Classical conditioning, if you remember your psychology class, was Pavlov's dog. Remember that? Unconditioned stimulus, unconditioned response. And then you add the bell. Then you have a conditioned stimulus, conditioned response. So we can really teach our athletes through classical and operant. And operant just means reward. Now, you never want to reward extrinsically. Okay? Like saying, well, if you play in the greatness tournament, I'm going to buy you some new shoes, right? Okay? Because that's an extrinsic reward. But what could I do? How could I reward them? That's intrinsic. That's intrinsically based. Come on, people. I gotta hear you create something here. That's intrinsic, because we learn what intrinsic motivation is.
We think about emotions and feelings, and how they feel about themselves.
Okay? Like how? What do you mean?
Well, I mean, a lot of kids want their parents say, yeah, like watching you cry.
Okay?
You did a great job.
Okay? I love watching you play. Okay? But again, we don't want our kids to play that pleases. That's an extrinsic reward. We want them to play because they love the game. Okay? So, for example, a reward that's intrinsic is, you know what? You've been giving such great effort. Your energy has been so good when I watch you play. Hey, want to go out with friends this Friday? Usually got to be home by 10. Stay up till 10:30. Okay? That's an intrinsic reward because it's not anything external, but it's to their personality, that they're being trusted. And they'll learn to own that. Now, I don't know if that was a very good example because some of you don't want your kids staying out later at night, but again, it is a reward. But it's not external. It's to their feelings, it's to their emotions. Okay? I'll just say this, do not give them material objects as a reward. Do not. Okay? You're asking them to be extrinsically motivated. Okay? Yeah, not money. Yeah. You know, people find it interesting, and I'll educate you real quick about this. Professional sport, when you get paid money to play, that's an A motivator. That's an A motivator. So when you look out on Sunday afternoon and you watch NFL teams, the teams like the Seattles and the New Englands of the world have really specific strategies in motivation science because they have to. This notion that someone's making $2 million a year, $5 million a year, and they're going to be motivated because of that, That's false. Again, people are motivated because they love the game. And if you look at the Seattle Seahawks, the New England Patriots, you look at their rosters, they have all kinds of 5th round draft choices, 6th, 7th, free agents, weren't even drafted. But they know how to play together, task and social cohesion. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. So ironically, we think talent is where it's all at. People that's playing together, playing for each other, sharing. That's where it's at. Okay? So professional athletes aren't the highest motivated athletes out there. And we have research to even say full scholarship athletes in college sometimes become A-motivated as well. So professional athletes would really, that's where coaching really matters. Like I told you, I'm on the radio, and a lot of the guys that I'm on the radio with, they're like, oh, this is a quarterback's league. It's a player's league, it's not a coaching league. No, it's a climate culture league. And New England and Seattle prove that. It's how you set a culture of excellence that really leads to peak performance. Because you can't just take talent and put it out there. And I know Jim's had some really talented teams here that didn't perform at peak levels, and then he got them there later in the season from playing together, task and social cohesion. Not just because you just turn loose. I coached at Mullen High School. We won a state championship. Better situation, year 2000, Rock and Mullen, we're playing Columbine in the semifinals. We have 6 Division I kids on our team. 6. We're 6'5", 285 across the front line. Columbine, their defensive line, 5'10", 205, 6'1", 200. Regular high school kids. We can't block them. We cannot block them. They had 1 Division I kid on that team. Now, this was 2000. This was the year after the shooting. They were playing for something beyond. And it was emotional. And so we had 61 kids who were bigger, stronger, faster. They kicked our butt. I never stood on the sidelines as a coach and just went, oh my gosh. They just literally, they didn't get the memo that they were supposed to lose. People, that's not talent. That's effort, energy, attitude. And that all starts right here. Yes.
Oh, so we were talking about rewards for me. I guess my question is, it seems like I'm still rewarding the kids with anything. Is it more of what you're trying to reward them for on the court, helping out other kids or building them up, or is it more about building them up to motivate them themselves? Because if you say out like it's still an extrinsic reward, but it seems like what you're trying to say is you want to reward them for their intrinsic abilities, not their extrinsic achievements.
Well, when I reward them for being able to stay out later, that's trust. That essentially boils down to trust.
Rewarding them for some intrinsic achievement or some extrinsic achievement.
No, for playing well, for arm swing, footwork, whatever it is, the process.
So it's the process.
Yes, the process, not outcome. Yeah, you were here when I talked about 15 kills and 12 kills and how we reward process instead of outcome. We're all process oriented. The outcome's going to happen. And where performers get in trouble is they attach their thoughts to the potential negative outcome. Potential negative outcome of an event. And so they're compartmentalized. They don't deploy their 100% of themselves. They deploy 60, 70, 80%. I don't know if you still have these shirts. You used to have shirts that say dare to be excellent or dare to be great. And I remember the first time I read that, I was like, dare to be great. Well, you have to really have a lot of courage to throw yourself out there. I used to teach public speaking in college, and I'd see people dynamic in the classroom situation, and they'd come up here and speak. And boy, they would just compartmentalize. They'd just survive. They put half of themselves away. But if you deploy who you really are as a speaker, those are the great speakers. Who you are. Just bring who you are. but a lot of us aren't able to do that. So attaching yourself to a potential negative outcome is where we get in trouble because it's an outcome. But if we reward the process, that's really what develops intrinsic motivation. Because again, like I said, if one game she has 12 kills, you don't want to reward outcome because there'll be a match where she only has 4 kills. But she still played really well. So it's great arm swing, great footwork. What do you mean?
It's not like you were talking about my daughter.
With the...
Trying to get them to not worry about the failure and worry about the process.
Yeah.
Instead of staying in your comfort zone, going beyond that and doing better.
Yeah. Well, 3 populations have to be educated. Parents, the athletes, and the coaches. And all those 3 populations have to value process and reward process. Yeah, well, and that's the athletes.
Like the whole team.
Yeah. And so see, here's what happens. If coaches reward process and value it, and then the athlete goes home, and you say, man, you had 16 kills today, that's outstanding. Seems innocent. But again, it's rewarding outcome. You know, I've said this before, but Alabama football works on first step for the offensive lineman. First step, hand placement, hit for an hour every practice. First step, that's it. It's process. Because they understand if you get that first step, you have a good chance to swing your hips and shoulders and get that block. So it's process is what develops intrinsic motivation. But you have to reward it, you have to value it. Same thing with homework. You know, they bring home a great paper, it's an A. You don't say, wow, that's a great job, you got an A. Well, maybe you do. But what I would recommend now, you say, wow, really proud of your effort. Really proud of the way you structured your study time, the way you prepared. That's outstanding. They see it. They know. They have enough people on the outside telling them, you know, outcome. But again, it's a process. Okay? Understand social comparison. There's an area of psychology called social psychology. And social psychology studies how we behave in the presence of others. Okay? Brittany, you're a high school student. So if you're hanging out just with your friends, you guys have certain behavior. But if your dad walks up, does that behavior change a little bit? It does. So our behavior changes in the presence of others. And we research this. Guess what the highest level of social comparison is in our society? The highest level. We've researched this. That's a good one. That's second. That's a good one. It's sport. It's competition. Because you're basically going, here we are, there you are, let's see what you got. And you do it in a public forum. Okay? Everybody's there to see. And so that's why athletes get anxious. And they have that fear of potentially failing because, oh my gosh, everybody's out here watching. I got to pass, that girl can really serve. And if I shank this, it's not just me seeing it. Everyone sees it. High level of social comparison. Now, some athletes thrive on social comparison. Right? I mean, I told you my daughter played here at Front Range, so I just remember the girls that were here then. I can name some players that they loved it, right? Rachel Engel, to me, was a player that just thrived on competition. And then there's players that, when they get compared socially, what do? They can shut down or partially shut down and kind of just go, oh crap, here I go. I hope I'm shanked, right? Versus, let's get it on. I have all the tools, I'm ready, I'm regulated, let's do it. 2 different approaches. And so we have to give our athletes tools to regulate themselves instead of just survive on the floor, survive on the court. They have to thrive. And so it's the 3 populations. Parents value and reward it, coaches value and reward it, athletes value and reward it. And if we can do that, then we have a real chance to build that intrinsic motivation.
Remember, the intrinsic is when I said emotions and feelings, it's the love you have for the game, it's the love you have for competition, for being together with the team, the social side, and you love it. And so when you perform well, it's those feelings you attach about who you are and how you contributed to your performance or your team's performance, right? I mean, that's so much of the intrinsic piece. And so it could be just that feeling an athlete has when they perform well is their intrinsic motivation. And the reward for that is they feel good about themselves. They feel better about who they are and their identity as a volleyball player, right? So, I mean, there doesn't have to be a, you get this or this carrot of things, but sometimes I think being together with people they like to be around, peers, because they're adolescents, especially the older adolescents, that is a big value for them and part of their identity. So being together with them later, going to a movie with them, that's great reward right there. If it's with a family and you're having dinner, let's go to dinner together and be together, and it's more, the focus is probably on being together and that relationship and the emotional connection that you have, and that you show that you value them as a person and their effort and their energy, the process piece of value of what they did. And so that's some of the rewards that I would give as an example is intrinsically based versus extrinsic.
Yeah, that's key. You know, I'll give you another example. This is the parent protocol card that you have there. Okay, this is it on the slide, but just wanted to go over this real quick. So again, reward process, not outcome. Put that on your visor, put that in your wallet. We have a bunch of them up here if you want to put 4 in your house, 1 on your mirror, something to remind you. Because if you can follow this, you're on your way to building an intrinsically motivated athlete. There's more that's involved, but that's at least a start. Because that's huge. Understanding how they're motivated, what their motives are. Okay? So those are pretty simple protocols. But let me give you an example of what she just mentioned about feelings. So I can remember when my daughter played at Front Range, and they would walk out on the floor in their red and black. And there was a certain feeling, right? You know what I mean? And that meant you were part of excellence. You were part of great expectations. You weren't hoping, wishing, and dreaming. You were expecting performance. That's an intrinsic reward to be part of that, to be part of that system. I met this weekend with an NFL coach who was here and now he's somewhere else, doesn't matter where. But him and I really connect. And we're mapping out a plan to help his new quarterback perform at peak levels. And were you in the office then? Or you got there later? Was it you that was saying you could hear us? Okay. So we were getting so fired up in the office, talking about leadership, talking about training this guy in leadership skills. And this coach looks over and he says to me, he goes, man, I love being with you. He goes, you are so passionate. You are so positive. And I looked at him and I said, brother, I love being with you. I said, you're one of my favorite coaches. I mean, just the way we feel when we're with each other. I feel like we can do anything. And that's intrinsically rewarding. I almost work for free with this guy. Because I didn't want to do anything together. It's the same thing for your athlete. When they're performing at peak levels, when they're, again, because you know what, if you follow these, it's less stressful for you. It's less stressful for you because, again, you're rewarding their development, not their outcome. See, what we try to do in sport, what we should do in youth sport, is develop a player. Develop them. And not get so worried about winning. Okay? Winning is a quantitative assessment. What about the qualitative assessment, the experience of being the best you can be on that given day? And we've got to be more in touch with that as parents. Because oftentimes we're just win, or be the best. Develop every day. And that'll take care of itself. Player development. Okay? So keep that card with you. Now, let's talk about the differences between siblings. in your own family. I hear parents say this all the time, because again, we don't just work with volleyball. We work with football, tennis, water polo, you name it. Right now, I have clients across the board. And I hear parents say, gosh, you know, I have a daughter that she works her butt off. She gets up at 5 in the morning, she gets ready for school, she's motivated. Then I got another daughter who's like, oh my gosh, you know, I can't get her out of bed, I can't get her to work hard. And so parents will often think, what am I doing wrong? And I tell them, probably nothing. People, we have to realize that we are composed psychologically of personality. We measure 5 personality characteristics when we give people assessments. In about a week, 10 days, I don't know what day it is, but I'm going to go to the NFL Combine, and I'm going to give players personality assessments. And these players are about to become, a lot of them are about to become millionaires. And more importantly, teams are going to invest millions of dollars in these new employees. They need to know who they're getting psychologically. Because it's not enough to know them physiologically. Because most of these players dominate high school, dominate college, now they're going to get to the NFL, and they're going to get hit in the mouth. Like they've never got hit before. It's like, whoa. So personality-wise, how do you respond to that? We don't know, because we don't have a record of it. Dominant. That's why so many players don't succeed at the NFL level. Okay, so the closest thing we can do is give them a personality assessment. Your kids, if you have 1, 2, 3, 7, whatever you have different personalities. And these are the 5 personality traits we measure in psychology. It's not 5 of this assessment. That's the 5 we look at. And through those 5, we can tell you who works hard. Who is it in their DNA? Or do they need a carrot? Remember Jamarcus Russell, for all of you who follow football, came out at LSU 2007? First player picked in the draft. The Raiders spent $42 million on him. Did not even know he was dyslexic. How can you do that? Heck, I know a guy who works for Apple. He got promoted from middle management to upper management. It took 6 months of assessments before he got there. And yet we don't know who we're getting. Investing millions of dollars. In case of your athlete, who do you have? Neuroticism. That's moods. We do personality assessments, and I'm not trying to sell personality assessments because I'm behind right now as it is with NFL stuff. But we can tell you who's going to be successful in terms of their mood deployment. Conscientiousness at the bottom. Okay, if someone scores high in conscientiousness, that means it's in their DNA. It's in their DNA. It burns in them. If they're low in conscientiousness, we're going to have to get creative on how to motivate them. That doesn't mean they're a bad person. Okay? It doesn't mean they're any worse than the one that we call a high burn and low burn. A lot of us coaches, man, they're a high burn person. They're just, how do I do it, man? Just point in the right direction, let's go. And then there's low burn, where it's like, okay, you know, you kind of got to get them going. And you may have a high burn and a low burn in your family. And it's not going to help if you keep pushing that low burn and trying to push buttons and figure. You've got to understand those are different personalities. Okay. We have 3 boys, 11, 8, and 6, and I'll tell you what, my 11-year-old is just a high burn. And it's personality based. He's played 18 football games, he's been thrown out of 12. He can't stop on the whistle, he won't stop on the whistle. He's playing in the front yard today. He'll play touch football and he pushes the kid down on the concrete, on the street. He's a high burn kid. But what I want you to understand from this is understand who you have. And you will lessen conflict in your family if you understand, you know what, I got a low burn person. That doesn't mean they're going to get C's and D's their whole life and underperform athletically. It just means you have to be a little more patient with them. Because I have a friend that played 12 years in the NFL, Mark Mulaney. And he was a low burn kid. Graduated George Washington, 6 foot, 185, walked on to CSU, graduated 5 years later, 6'6", 265, with a first round draft choice of Minnesota Vikings, played 12 years. He was a low burn kid until he got to college. And then he took off. So we've got to understand our athletes develop at different levels. And you may have a kid playing on a twos team, and they may be a future All-American in college. And the kid that's playing on the ones team may not be playing at 17. People, they develop at different levels. But understand, it's personality-based. It's not necessarily this one's lazy. Oh, I have a lazy daughter. I have a lazy son.
Avoid labeling.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't want to label.
Lazy,
But it's not, I'm not sitting here also saying that just, oh, okay, well, they're low burn, so I'll just let them go. No, you have to be creative, again, intrinsically motivated. Change the environment. Change something in their environment to help them become more motivated. And then just sit back and let it develop. Let their coaches develop them. You're not their coach. I learned that the hard way, people. You're not their coach. You need to be their parent. Okay. So those are the 5. On the back of my car, on those cars, you have my contact information. If you ever want me to do a personality assessment, let me know. Okay? I can do it over the internet, really simple. I send you a link, she takes it, sends it back, I run a report. We can do it over FaceTime, over the phone. And I just tell you what they are. It's helpful to know not only athletic, but academic. But again, that's why I want to show there's differences. Anything to add to that?
No, I just think it's really interesting because that's something that's used at the school level too. As my background in school counseling, that we use some personality inventories. I don't know if you've taken one like the Myers-Briggs is a very popular one with extroversion, introversion, judgment, sensing, feeling, judging, like all those different types, and it's very similar to this, but this is very research-based, and it is fascinating to see what your personality assessment looks like to better understand yourself or your child. When we work with individuals, like you said, and kind of go, oh yeah, okay, that makes sense. And that's maybe why they respond to different things in certain ways. So it is very fascinating.
Yeah, and just out of defense, Myers-Briggs compared to this, what we do is crap. Myers-Briggs is crap. This is psychological core. You can't get the assessments you get unless you have 3 qualifications: PhD, level C interpreter, which is American Psychological rates ABC, C is the highest level, and you've been training psychometrics. I've been training all 3 of those areas. Myers-Briggs is so general. This is psychological core. I'll give you an example of this, and he wouldn't mind because I've checked it with him because I use it in my presentations. Demarius Thomas, he's one of our clients, and he took this assessment. And because I was pretty curious about some things with him. One of the most gifted, he's a freak of nature to be that big and run like that. But I want to see if there were some gaps. And I'm not going to tell you what his assessment was, but it really filled in the blanks. So now when I work with him, I have a specific approach. So it gives us that baseline. So all I'm asking you to do is understand your child, your athlete. That if one's high burn, one's low burn, one's middle burn, okay, to just understand that's personality based. And that can be genetic, okay, how they're wired. It can be environmental. See, one of the things, and this is not a lesson in psychology, but here's get a little bang for the buck here. You don't parent each child the same. You may think you do, but you don't. You know, I don't wake up in the morning and go, man, I'm going to treat Caleb really good, Keegan kind of good, and Drake I don't even care about. But it plays out that way. Because here's what happens. Depending on their personality, they evoke certain emotions from you. And if they're what we call difficult temperament, man, right? Does Caleb do that with me? Okay? Keegan's like just hanging out, man. Keegan and I can go to the hardware store and have a great time. I take Caleb to the hardware store and I'm exhausted by the time I get home. Personality based. So it's environmental, it's genetic, it's both things. But the good news is we can take a low burn kid and we can motivate them, but we just have to understand, we have to change our environment and create with them. Okay, social versus driven athletes. Girls more often than boys are social in their sport context. Oftentimes they look for that. That's what they get into sport for, is social. And then here you have a team, you may have a setter and an outside hitter that are just high burn kids. And then some of the other ones are kind of medium, low burn. And then you can have some kids get off each other. Come on, let's go. But understand that some of those kids are socially driven. It's not the end of the world. Because again, they develop at different times. I've seen kids that are social at 13 and 18, they're a kid, you know what. So it changes and develops over time. And we have to be more patient as parents as letting our athletes develop. Let them develop. Let them skin their own knees. Let them go through the process of figuring out where they fit. I teach adolescent psychology. I teach 2 classes at CU Metro. I teach sports psychology and I teach adolescent psychology. The number one thing that adolescents, and you're athletes and adolescents, the number one thing that adolescents struggle with in adolescence is identity. Who am I? Where do I fit in? Now you layer on top of that all the social comparison that comes in sport. Remember I told you the highest level of social comparison in sport? Layer that on. They're already struggling with identity. Now you layer on that. Okay? It's a lot. It's a lot to put on. Okay. Social comparison can be valuable in certain personalities, like I said. If somebody's a high burn, they love that. They love social comparison. But if they're a low burn, they may not, let me survive this. Because I'm afraid I'm going to be judged. And how can you help this? If you got, let's just pretend now, you got a low burn kid, not real motivated, right? What could you do at home to really build their self-belief system? What could you do?
Notice we don't use the word confidence. You might have heard of that in our prior presentation. We want to build their belief system, which most people will say is confidence, but we want to avoid using that word confidence.
Yeah, that's not us, but I'll fill that in. We do not use the word confidence. Good, bad, or indifferent. Because too many athletes have heard, gosh, you're really good, you just need to build your confidence. Too many athletes have heard that. And so some athletes, they hear the word confidence, trigger, oh shoot, I'm going to be judged. Good, bad, or indifferent. We call it a belief system. It's called self-efficacy, but we call it belief system. You build your athlete's belief system, much more stable than confidence. Okay? But what could you do if you have a low burn kid and they don't really value social comparison? What could you do to really build their belief system at home? What do you think? Brittany, you're an analyst, and what would build your belief system? Just be real honest. You're not going to charge your dad, right? Help her out, right? What would you do? Parents? What could you do? And we reward what? What do we reward? Thank you. Process. In anything they do, reward process. Continually reward process. Because the reason they don't like social comparison is judgment, outcome, potential negative outcome, process. See, you can hide the process. Some of sports psychology is tricky too. And if you're rewarding process, footwork, I can do that. I can have great footwork, right? I can have a great arm swing. Before you know it, stance, help me. What am I? Stance, platform, swing. Before you know it, they're very good at process. Before you know it, process leads to what? Outcome. Instead of putting their head over here, I only had 3 kills last time. I gotta have 8 this time. Now they're going to really overcompensate. No, stay focused on the process.
It's something I think that was said, but I didn't exactly, is remind like if it was building Brittany's, remind her of past successes and the process that she was using for that past success. So that builds self-efficacy. So if your adolescent or your child is struggling, if you can remind them, coaches, this works as well, you've struggled in the past, and you've gotten through it before, you can get through it again. And you give them a specific example when they had success, and how did they get through it? What was the process that they did? So does that make sense? That builds their belief system to know, oh yeah, I've struggled in the past, or as a team we've struggled in the past, but this is what we did. These were the steps we went through, or the process to get to the success, or the outcome.
Right. So again, we're largely talking about personality characteristics in their DNA. We've talked about that. We talked about low burn versus high burn. In their DNA. There's some kids that's just, I mean, let's use her and let's throw ourselves under the bus here. Okay? I mean, she may not agree with this, but she's not the most objective person to analyze her own behavior, is she? I am. Then you can tell me about mine. So
It's
Melanie.
compared to a psychologist like this. It's so analytical.
So Melanie is a more accomplished athlete than I am, right? She's a state champion hurdler, a national champion in volleyball, you know, blah, 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 right? But she's kind of a medium burn person.
I'm just about average. What about average?
See, here we go. But if I say, let's get up at 4 in the morning, go to the office, and put together the quote, what's your first response?
At 4 in the morning, I'm like, shoot, we can do that another time at 4 in the morning. I won't be completely with it.
See, and me, let's go. 2, 1, 3, let's go get it done.
But I'll still get out and work out for work.
No, I know. I mean, but my point is,
I'm above average, and I'm not at the very top. Because I won't get up at 4 in the morning. He's very much at the top, right? Or I don't know very much at the top, but he's higher than average. So he'll get, if he can't sleep at night, he'll get up and go work. If I can't sleep at night, I'm going to just try to fall asleep, right? And figure out ways to fall asleep, not get up and work.
So again, just understand that social piece versus the driven athlete in personality. That's a lot of what personality is. Okay? All right, now, here's what I want you to do. I want you to do, especially parents here. Okay, you have a pen, you have a piece of paper. I want you to create 3 methods to enhance your athlete's enjoyment of the game. In other words, what I'm trying to see is, how can you intrinsically motivate them? Now that you've learned a little bit about intrinsic motivation, create an idea, a couple words, sentence, and then we're going to share that with each other. An opportunity to enhance their success and their enjoyment. I mean, imagine that, enjoying sport too. That's one of the original intents of it. Is to have fun. Yes?
I think, I don't know if you told me, this is where I guess from. So I maybe try to encourage whenever she's going out of her comfort zone is aggressive, I guess, or going out of the comfort zone.
Okay. What does that look like? What do you mean going out of the comfort zone? Like, give me an example.
So one of my daughters will kind of limit her athleticism because she's afraid of getting embarrassed.
So she can compartmentalize.
She makes an error. Point it out, say that's great. You're aggressive because you're supposed to.
Great effort. Great energy. Right?
So not focusing on the error, you're
No,
trying to take
just
the
saying,
focus
there was
off
an
the
error.
error.
That's going to happen. You were aggressive.
Yeah, but you don't even have to say it was an error. She knows that. You know what I mean? Just say, hey, great job, great effort, great energy. I love your way you attack the game.
She will shoot exactly. She knows. If she'll come to me and say, I can't believe I did that.
And you're a former athlete. So, well, that is, but here, that's what happens, you know? I mean, You can tell us countless situations at Alabama where you were struggling.
So yeah, in volleyball, I mean, I can think of how my parents were with me and how I was as a player. And there's numerous times as a volleyball player that you struggle. You know, or you're gonna make mistakes. And what's hard for me, and I wish I had these strategies when I was a player, if I made mistakes, is worried about the potential negative outcome again of hitting the ball out, or hitting the ball to the block, or shanking a pass. Is replaying that in your mind the next time you're up, and or trying not, thinking not what to do, and so what you should do. And so focusing on, for your daughter, the process, or I think as a parent, really just the effort, energy, and attitude that's on her shirt, and just encouraging her to focus on what's next. And like you said, don't focus on that last part. If she points it out to you, I would say that's part of sport. But what you can do is focus on what's next in your technique and your process and listening to your coach.
But I like what you said about going out of the comfort zone. We need more athletes to have that belief system to do that. To go beyond where it's comfortable. Dare to be great.
So, I really like what he's saying about the kid is conservative because she's afraid to make mistakes, and then she risks, and when she risks, she makes a mistake.
Right.
So to recognize, hey, you're really aggressive there, way to go for it.
Yeah.
You made a mistake, right? That's encouraging that belief system.
Yeah.
That if I go for it, eventually I'll be successful, and it's rewarding the intrinsic thing, right? That she did go for it. And he's kind of neutralizing the fact that it wasn't error because she went for it. So he's giving her his attention and recognizing the good part of what she's doing, which is an intrinsic effort, right? An intrinsic action.
Sure.
So that's one of the three components that you talked about: parent, player, like the teammates and the coach. Because whenever you said teammate, I thought you were talking about the kids themselves. That's why I was saying, what about the teammates?
Yeah.
I don't know what your kid is, but I think my kid. I want to make sure that she knows I don't care if you make a mistake. Go for it. Do what the coach tells you to do, and just go for it.
Yeah, go for it.
But she's turned out teammates may not be like that.
Right.
And that's an irrelevant cue for her to worry
So
about.
irrelevant. That's why I try to tell her, coach, whoever it is, you don't be that player. You make sure you encourage your teammates to be able to make. If you're going for it, you're going for it.
Right.
Be very conservative.
And same for the parents. I think that's the biggest thing we emphasize for you to do is focus on the effort, energy, and attitude they're giving. It doesn't matter if you make a mistake or not. If you're giving that full effort, that full energy, and your attitude is there to go out on the limb and do your best.
So that's my third of that problem.
Yeah.
Saying, you know what, I'm here to watch you.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, let me give you an example. Our 11-year-old son, the one who gets thrown out of all the games. I don't. Not all the games, but I mean, he's been thrown out of half of the games he's played. Yes.
This might help. My daughter also was making mistakes, and she still is. But I asked her after one game. I said, "So, do you remember the third play of the game when the girl shanked the ball or she missed it?" My daughter would go, "No." I go, "Neither does anybody else."
Right.
And I asked her that a few times, and she was like, "Okay, I get it wrong." I
Yeah.
said, "Seriously, if you make a mistake, the next play goes on, and then the next play, and the only person that remembers that mistake is the person who made it.
Sure.
And they'll get over it once they realize that 3 games."
Yeah.
It doesn't, no one's going to remember. They will, but once they realize, people quickly forget who did what.
Yeah. Well, and on your PST card, the one with the yellow top, we have on there irrelevant versus relevant cues. Those are the things we talk about, is what to focus on that's relevant. Like if I'm a passer and I just shanked, a couple passes, my relevant cues are my stance, my alignment, my platform, everything, the process, not, oh crap, here goes another one. You know what I mean? Because again, that's outcome based. So if we teach it, it's so simple. Remember the Super Bowl, Broncos, Seahawks, first play of the game? Yeah, so we have what this is another lesson, but somatic anxiety and cognitive anxiety. Somatic anxiety, any nurses, doctors?
What does soma mean?
Soma is body. So somatic anxieties, muscle tension, increased heart rate, increased respiration, muscle tension. When that guy's snapping, he's done that a million times. Million times. Well, he probably was experiencing high levels of somatic anxiety, so his swing path and snapping wasn't fluid, just like an arm swing, right?
Yeah, I have an example of a hitter of this.
And so he tried to snap it, he was feeling tension, so he snapped it a little hard. And I can make the argument that was the beginning of the end of that game, that play. That set the psychological tone of that game. Seattle will admit you, they're not 35 points. They were not 35 points better than Denver at that time. But psychologically, Denver just was deer in the headlights. So if we don't regulate somatic anxiety, if we don't regulate cognitive anxiety, the thinking part, then that's when we're going to really attach ourselves to those potential negative outcomes. But if we regulate those things, then our athletes really have a chance to deploy 100% of who they truly are.
So my example is, I'll try to be quick, as an outside hitter, when I already make a mistake, then I get some more somatic anxiety during my arm swing. It's tenser, and I started to muscle the ball. I don't know if any of you coaches use that term, but I had a coach at Alabama that used that. Stop muscling the ball, Melanie. And what I needed to do was go through some PSTs, but no one had taught me how to use these PSTs when I was playing volleyball in college, pro, anytime. I learned them later. What I needed to do is go through some positive self-talk, focus on relevant cues, not what happened in the past, my technique and my routine, my footwork getting off the net, and maybe I've taken a deep breath when it's a down period, because that's helping calm and bring my arousal and anxiety levels down to regulate them. So that when I'm swinging, I'm not muscling the ball because I'm going really tight, instead of having a nice relaxed quick arm swing. It's tense because I have somatic anxiety because I'm worried about not making a mistake. Instead of relaxing and swinging with a relaxed arm swing. So that's why I would make mistakes and maybe get into a slump. My slump was caused from cognitive and somatic anxiety, and then my inability to regulate it.
Yeah, that's the key, because all athletes are going to struggle at times. I don't care if you're all Galaxy, you're going to struggle at a time. How do you get out of that? How do you take the tools and get out of that, right? Instead of being subbed out, and then you figure it out. How about figure it out on the floor and have the tools to do that and get out of it? And that's really what we aim to do. Okay. Other ideas. Careful, right, son. What'd you write? Okay, yeah, build a belief system, right? Any others? I pointed right at you. Any others?
As a coach, taking an opportunity with my kids is to sit down and like, I have no idea what you're doing, and show me. And then I get to tell them I didn't know anything, right? So now they kind of become a coach for me. And that kind of empowers them to share their knowledge.
Are you a coach?
Just little league stuff, but they know me as a coach. Most of them probably say that.
Have you coached them? That's challenging when you coach your own kids. It really is the boundaries. Where does one stop and begin? Ride home, dinner table. That's challenging. If you do it, I won't say it can't work, but it's really challenging. It really is. How old are your kids?
This is actually my first season.
Good. Why? What do you mean?
We're not a coach now, but
So you're just hanging around, coaching her? Yeah. No, so that's what we call it reciprocal teaching. They're teaching you. As long as you don't coach them back again. Just let them teach you. Yeah, here's a proper stance, serve, receive. Cool, that's neat. I like that. And then that's it. Let's go to the movies, forget it. Not, well, if you just lean a little bit further, you know what I mean? So, What else?
I need to keep my daughter alone on date night, the days of matches or after until she said she has something she wants to talk about.
Holy cow, we're done. That's one of the best. If we do the, forget everything I just said. There you go.
Because,
Let her do it.
if you know what, I'm not coming up to her and saying, oh, you did this wrong, you did that wrong. I'm trying to help her, but
Right.
it's distracting her probably.
Yeah.
And making her feel like, dude, I need to be with the team or whatever, just leave me alone.
Yep.
So what we say is let them come to you. And because my master's is in counseling, when they come to you, you use some basic counseling strategies of listening, number one, and you just paraphrase back and reflect back on their content and their feelings. If you can try to avoid questions, that helps. Because adolescents, when you start asking questions, usually whoop, the defense comes up, and that's when they don't want to be around you because you're asking them too many questions that they don't want to answer. So listening is important, letting them come to you. That's great.
Like, give me an example.
We didn't win. We're not winning for.
We didn't win. Okay. They're frustrated they're not winning or something?
There's so much more to game than winning. There's so much.
Processes.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Well, that's something that kind of sounds like.
Yeah, player development. Are you getting better? I bet you got better today. You know, honey, if you get 1% better today, 1% better tomorrow, at the end of the week, how much percent better are you? 5. At the end of the month, how much percent better are you? You know what I'm saying? It's not about winning, it's about player development. And you know what? Teams, here's the deal. A team can win a lot and they don't develop their players. And a team can lose and they're developing their players. So don't get fooled by that quantitative assessment. But what I love about what you said, it's very simplistic. And you know what? That's key. A lot of the simple things, the intrinsic, extrinsic stuff, the word process, I mean, that sounds simple, but if we do that, it changes things. I guarantee if you do what you just said, your daughter's going to own her motivation. Just stay out of the way, let her coach her, let her coach tutor her. You know, I used to play football. And again, I was in 2 NFL training camps, and I could take my 11-year-old and teach him a ton of technique. How to get off blocks. I played linebacker, how to get off blocks. I'm not going to teach him anything. Let his coaches teach him. And I'll guarantee you, he probably won't have a coach teach him that technique until he gets into college. If he plays, I don't know. If he plays the French horn, that's cool to me, you know, whatever. But I can teach him a ton of technique, and I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it because that's not my role. My role is to be his dad. You know? So I love what you said. That's great. You got to start a parent support group.
Yeah, that's great. I can come in because I haven't got the card to see where it is on it. The very last part of the yellow PST card says disappointment is part of sport. We touched on it before. So when they come to you frustrated that they didn't win or they feel like they didn't play their best or they had these mistakes, you could listen to them and reflect back. And you could say, yeah, disappointment is part of sport. And that goes back to seeing the game and that they get something out of that. And so they might need to just, if they do come to you at some point and say that they're frustrated about, they didn't feel good about their play or something was frustrating about it, let them vent that out, listen to them, and maybe just say, disappointment is part of sport. That's how you get better. If you won every game, and every game you played, I mean, that's unrealistic, right? If you win every game you played, the best, your peak levels, every single game, every play of every game, and your team won every game, they're probably not learning. Because there's no disappointment there. There's no mistakes. There's no scraping their knees. So it's okay, and as a parent, because I know we've been there, sometimes you want to rescue, and you want to be there, like to tell them how to fix it. And typically, gender-wise, males want to solve problems, and women are more likely to listen. I mean, sometimes males go, I have to fix this. My daughter's coming to me, or my son's coming to me, and I've got to fix this for them because I'm their dad. You don't have to fix it. It's going to release you from that. It doesn't have to be that hard. You're trying to do more. However you need to. Yeah, you don't have to fix the problem as the parent.
Well, she's going to develop a skill set from learning how to navigate that. You know, I mean, the skill, we don't, like you said, we don't develop skill sets when you just only have success. You really don't. I mean, I look back at my career now, I wish I would have had more disappointment in high school and college, because when I got to the NFL, I didn't know how to deal with disappointment. I did not know how. And if I would have had some disappointment along the way, I would have been a lot, you know. I got my first training camp, and after about 2 weeks, I called my brother, and I'm like, shh. You know, I'm used to just dominating, and it's different out here. You know, I didn't have a skill set. So the good news is when they are struggling, there's a chance to develop skill sets for them. And that's a positive thing. And then they'll learn, and they'll get better from that. But allow them. One more. Let's hear one more. From a parent. What's it strategy? Because I asked for 3, and all I'm asking for is 1. Yes.
My daughter actually went into sports class. She was really struggling with chemistry. Well, choices of decide what you're going to learn in the regular class versus class. Didn't follow up with back into the class. So I decided to stay in the class. I told her I was proud of her.
Yeah.
For taking on the challenge, even though it's going to be a challenge.
Yeah. Well, and look, the way you said that, it's up to you. But think about what you're going to learn, you know, in the honors versus the traditional. I thought that was very well said. And you gave her ownership of that. See, we have to trust our athletes. They kind of know what to do. They do. And if we allow their coaches to coach them and allow them to skin their own knees and learn from that process, great things can happen. Absolutely. Brittany, as a high school athlete, want to add anything? Anything you've learned or observations? Or?
My son's like look pleasant and stand, like sometimes I'll like make a mistake and I'll be like,
Yeah, that's a big one. Nonverbal communication. Yeah.
So are you saying not to look at the stands?
not really, yeah, but like really pleasant.
Look pleasant.
Oh, look pleasant. So you want to
Look pleasant. I like that. That's good. Look pleasant.
Look pleasant.
That's awesome.
And we do talk about that. We gave presentations to parents with the parent protocols. Is nonverbal communication is more accurate than verbal. And they can't hear what you're saying usually, but they can see what you're doing. And they can see your body language.
Yeah.
And it speaks volumes, as you just said.
Yeah.
So pleasant would be what? What's looking pleasant look like? From an athlete standpoint.
Smile a little more.
I'm smiling, maybe laughing. Okay, yeah.
But see, the thing we would tell you too as an athlete, don't look up in the stands either. Don't look for that feedback. Your feedback is your coach. You know, so it's both parts. Don't look up there, and then look more pleasant. We should teach a nonverbal class on just looking more pleasant in the stands. You know, we do talk a lot about nonverbal communication. Because we worked with a volleyball player whose dad, if she was a back row, her dad would get up and leave the gym if she shanked a few balls. I mean, think about that. You see your dad leaving the gym. And before that, it's like, you know, all that. And when we got her, when she came to us, she was thinking about giving up volleyball. And now she's got 3 Pac-12 schools have offered her. I don't say it's because of us, but we certainly gave her the whole parent. Because her dad's a PhD, and he's kind of a control guy. He's a high-burn dude, man. And so we just worked with him a lot. You worked with her a lot on some things, but your advice? I said, back off, dude. Sit in your chair have a nice little half smile, whatever. And that's what he did, and her performance changed.
And something else we tell parents is don't feel like you have to be at every competition because this is about them, the player, and they're playing for the intrinsic reasons. And so if you're like, I have a, maybe I'll just come to this one, I might have something else going on and I'm not there. This is about you having fun and you can tell me about it afterwards, but I'm not going to be there. It's okay if you're not at all of them. And I said I'd share my parents, they didn't go to very many volleyball tournaments. They probably went to about half, maybe a little more than half that were local, and they didn't ever go to any ones that were far away. They never traveled with me. And
That's because they're frugal.
so they wouldn't watch me play at Alabama. They went to Houston when we were there, but I don't remember anything about how I played or wasn't playing well. Or it was just kind of like they were just kind of there. They weren't really overly involved. And they would watch almost all of my high school matches, but they were only out for like half of my club stuff. I think because we'd have to drive over all day, and I had 3 siblings. That was probably part of it too, because there were 4 of us kids.
Yeah.
But it didn't bother me because I didn't think like, oh my gosh, my parents aren't watching me, and that means they don't care about me, or I'm not going to play so well because my parents aren't there. I played hard and loved the game, whether my parents were there or not.
That's the key.
Because it wasn't about them.
What's good about that also? You're not there all the time. You see their fruit. You see every little thing.
Okay.
See it.
Yeah.
It's kind of cool when you haven't seen play for a while. So it's like, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. And to not be there all the time, well, I'm telling you not to, but it really does let them know. It really does. And it really inspires them. They like, because my son would say, Dad, you going to my football game? Yeah. Because what are you doing? I said, oh, no, I'm just going to hang out in the house. You're not coming? No. But then he comes home after a football game, eats lunch, puts on his helmet, goes in the backyard and plays football another 3 hours. He loves it. And I see, we're professionalizing youth sport so much. I go to a youth football game, and they got speakers, and they're tailgating. And these kids are 10, 11 years old. And we literally suck the life out of them. So just be careful with that. Like you said, go to some of them. You don't have to go to all of them. Let them own that. And I think that can really cultivate that intrinsic piece we're talking about. Right? Any other questions before we go? Questions about, it doesn't have to necessarily be about anything here, but anything about, you have a daughter or a son that's doing this and you just want a quick question answered about it? Sure. Yeah.
I just had a question on the parent protocol part about how do you get a soft landing place for the parent in a stable home environment. Like, what are those 2 things?
Yeah, good question. So, soft landing place means that, you guys know we live in a really hyper-competitive society now with club sports. When I grew up, we didn't really have a lot of club sports, which I look back and I was very healthy. And thank goodness there's no club football. And then when there was club football, then this world was really getting out of control. But, there's all that social comparison in school, socially. When my daughter was at Cherry Creek High School, if you didn't have a Louis Vuitton backpack and Chanel sunglasses, you were out. There's a lot of pressure for these kids to perform academically, athletically, socially. So when they come home, there needs to be a soft landing place. Not so much, now I'm going to get coached again. Now I'm going to get taught, or I'm going to tell me about my academics again. Sure, I'm not saying don't parent them, but be a soft landing place. Just listen to them. What Mel said about listening is tremendous. And you know the greatest tool in listening? Shut up. Just shut up and let them talk. And some of us that are coaches or have been coached, we think we have all these answers. And we give them these 45-minute talks and they're not even listening. They're tuned out. So be that soft landing place that it's I like going home. I like going home because mom and dad are soft, they're kind. They say, how was the day? And if I say, I don't want to talk about it, they leave it at that. Okay? And then what was the other one? The
Stable home environment.
Stable, yeah, same thing. Stable, I don't know what that means because our home environment It's crazy.
You want me to talk about it?
Yeah, sure.
So, because it was the stable home environment and a bummer okay, it was stable and consistent. Okay, stable home, yeah, stable home environment. Okay, I thought you were talking about the blended family, but because they kind of go together, the blended family and stable home environment. So stable home environment, trying to be consistent and on the same page, right? Have some routines, so that causes stability in the environment, right? You want to give an example as for blended families? I was going to give an example for blended families.
Well, one thing that popped up in my head, I just want to say this too, and this is part of being a stable home. Promise me this one thing. I haven't asked for any promises today, have I? Have I? Promise me this, parents. You never, ever, ever talk negative about your team or your coach in front of them. Never. Or even with other parents. You may feel it, believe it, think it's in your DNA, okay? But don't do that. Because you can break up a team's cohesion like that from home, and it breaks up their cohesion here. Okay, because when you question their coach's competency, authority, abilities in any way, you've given them the green light to do it themselves. I mean, even a simple question like, well, why did your coach sub out da-da-da-da and play so-and-so? That's not your territory. That is not your territory. And if you'll hold that line, I mean, after the season, you can make decisions, whatever we want to make, but you never do that. Because the two top levels of performance, that's a different presentation, is what we call task and social cohesion. And you hear people call it chemistry. The teams that play with high levels of cohesion, that's built on the floor among the teammates, but in adolescent sports, it's built with their parents too. And parents can break down the cohesion of a team. You get a couple, I was going to say a couple moms, that would be very hard. You get a couple moms, you get a couple dads clicking up and talking, hey, this coach, that, man. And then the setters hearing that at home, you know what I mean? That's your leader, you can disrupt it like that. So that's the one promise. Never talk negative about a coach or the team in front of them. And that may be hard to do, but you can do it. You're an adult. And that's key. That's part of it.
Yeah, you know, and I have an example with our son again, with basketball, and it might be kind of what you were referring to earlier. He started to kind of question about why, you know, coach played this kid and not this one, or how come so-and-so wasn't at practice, but they got to play like the whole game. And he was asking me, like, why, Mom? Why did we do that? Why did the coach do this? And I said, that's your coach's decision. Your focus is on your process and getting better. And that is irrelevant. That is not your control. That is your coach's duty and job to make that decision who plays and how much. So I just redefined, like, whoa, you're the player. That's a coach's decision on who's playing and how much. And if you're concerned about it enough, who do you ask? My coach, right? And he had a question about my coach. He asked me, how come my coach told me not to drive like this and that I was pushing the ball too much? And I said, if you want to know, who do you ask? My coach. Right. You can ask your coach after practice. And your coach is going to let you know. So I tried to stop him from questioning why so-and-so's playing, or how come this one, or it wasn't fair that this happened and that happened. I'm like, stop. You focus on your effort, your energy, your attitude, and your technique and getting better every day at practice. But if it's really bothering you, who do you ask? If it's a concern, and it continues to be a concern, you go to your coach.
Yeah. Once you buy in, you're in. You go with 2 feet, you paddle in the same direction, you pull on the same rope, you fire your guns in the same direction. You're in. These coaches don't come to your job and say, man, you know, as an accountant, you're not really doing a good job. You know, they don't come to your job and critique you. Don't do it to them. You know what I mean? Do that, man. These teams can be all they can be. That's it. We good? Any other questions before we break? Hey, thanks. It's a small crowd, but very energetic, educated, competent, strong acumen, right?